Okay. I'm sure there'll be a few more people coming in to join us, but I'm going to get us started. And we are being recorded. And I appreciate folks staying on camera. That would be a nice thing. But hey, where'd Laura go?
I'm right here. I just have to get my phone. My internet is unstable, so I wanted to get a hotspot just in case I needed it. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. Unstable internet. We know all about that. It's so frustrating.
Unstable internet. Yes. That's what it is, you know? Okay.
Okay, doke. So I want to welcome everybody to our regular Tuesday night Shiphrahs Circle Community Doula Program meeting. We have a special presenter and workshop tonight. The wonderful, magnificent Laura Cox will be talking to us all about lactation and breastfeeding.
Hey.
This event is being recorded right now, and it will be available later on in our Better Birth TV YouTube channel. I am the executive director of Open Better Birth Foundation and Shiphrahs Circle Community Doula Program. Laura Cox is one of our wonderful community advisory board members and definitely a mama of this program since its beginning. When I first met Laura, we were doing a community nursing, and your baby you only had one baby then, right? And
I only had one baby then. Oh, man.
He was rather little.
He was. He's no longer
anymore.
Little.
And I always want to give wonderful just props to Laura for stepping in and connecting with me and being a good friend to me. At that time, I was working with beautiful teen moms in Alameda County, and she volunteered so much time and energy and good advice to those young mamas and helped the vast majority of our mamas breastfed for a good long time while going to work and going to school, which was something I was always incredibly proud of. And every once in a while, I still run into one of these young ladies who are like, "How's Miss Laura doing?" So,
man,
so
good stuff.
You definitely have a beautiful place in their hearts and in their mothering. And you've gone on to, those ladies are rocking the world with what they're doing. I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of you. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I might chime in because, I like to chime.
Love it.
And introduce yourself to folks who don't know you and all about breastfeeding.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My internet is unstable, so let me know if I need to repeat something or go back or do whatever. Hopefully this will work. I'm wondering if I should even just change to a hotspot now before we continue. Can everybody hear me? Am I?
Yes.
You just froze though.
I'm glad. So everybody can hear me and everything's working okay?
You were frozen for a while.
Thumbs up.
You were
Yeah, that's what I figured. Let me, if you could just give me. Okay.
That's it. Someone tell her she was frozen. The internet. What a pain in the butt. Okay, Laura's coming back in.
Woo!
Okay, Laura.
Am I back?
I missed you. I'm glad you're back.
This is going to be a lot of fun. So I think what I'm going to ask, see if this hotspot works. If it doesn't, then I'll have to go and move location or see what else I can do. So if you could bear with me, I apologize. I have to lock myself in my room. I'm going to introduce myself. Hopefully I won't get cut off again. My name is Laura Cox. I am a certified lactation educator and counselor, and I've been doing this now for a little over 10 years. I'm also a registered nurse through UCSF, and working towards my master's in health policy. Oh, I think I'm frozen again. Am I frozen again?
You're not.
Nope.
Okay, good. Okay,
You're good.
Good. So I'm super excited to be here with you all today. Today I do want to speak about lactation, and from my understanding, the majority of this group are doula people, correct? Like I don't have any. I guess I should rephrase that. I don't have any parents in this room. Okay. Do I have any parents that are here to learn about lactation in this room?
I am.
A parent. Woo!
Well, not yet. I'm 33 weeks.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
So congratulations. Nothing is going to change in my content, but how you apply the knowledge is obviously going to be slightly different, right? So I'm going to teach people how to help people get into certain breastfeeding positions or chest feeding positions. And then, of course, for your own personal use, you would just be teaching yourself. So that's only the thing that's going to kind of change and differ. I have put in the chat a link to my Google Drive. This is a link to a set of PowerPoint. It's actually PDF because I couldn't get my PowerPoints up on Google Docs, or I'm sorry, in Google Drive. But this is just a PDF. It's really just a breakdown of a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about with you today. It also has all the links of where I got the information, as well as all my references. So should there be a piece of this content that you find to be extremely interesting, you can go back to see where I found it, contact the source, do additional research, and continue to inform yourself in the world of lactation. Okay. Let me know if there's any issues or questions or concerns you may have with the Google Drive link. Hopefully you should be able to just download it and there won't be any issues there. Everybody still doing okay?
Everybody's doing okay. I believe we have another parent that's joined us. Ileana.
Awesome.
So we have a couple of
pregnant person. Excellent.
Here too. Just FYI.
I love it. So nothing here, like I said, in the content that I'm going to be teaching today, I don't change anything for what I teach my parents versus doulas or anybody else. It just is going to, how I teach doulas how to get people into certain lactating positions isn't necessarily going to apply to you. But a little bit more background on me before I move on. I do teach a variety of people. I teach nursing students, I teach med students, I obviously teach doulas, and I obviously do this prenatally. So I try to tackle lactation education on every spectrum of anybody that's willing to listen to me long enough talk about lactation. I'm going to do it. And so what I teach nurses and physicians or nurse or med students is slightly different than what I teach my doulas. And the only thing that really changes is medication, what can be prescribed and what can't be prescribed. I do speak to you as doulas and parents about medication, but I do it in a slightly different way because you're not going to be prescribing yourself anything. I mean, you may, but in a general scope of things, that's how things are going to shift. Okay, does anybody have any questions or concerns before we get started?
Nope, no questions.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to share my screen. Before I share my screen, I usually like to lay out a little bit of ground rule. So with lactation, one of the most amazing things about lactation is that it is a very inclusive act, and lots of people do it, and lots of different types of people do it. So you're going to hear me use different language. You're going to hear me say chest feeding. You're going to hear me say breastfeeding. You're going to hear me say lactating people. You're going to hear me say his or hers and them. And the reason why I do that is because each group needs to be represented, and you as doulas or as parents identify and support different community members. And so you need to learn how to use that language and basically who your audience is. So I want to make sure that you understand when I say breastfeeding, I'm not trying to be exclusive to breastfeeding. I'm just trying to acknowledge that there's a certain group of people within our community that need to hear breastfeeding. Same reason why there's a certain group of people within our community that need to hear chest feeding. And then there's a certain group of people that need to hear just lactation. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go all over the place because again, I have a very wide variety of people that are listening to this talk today. So just so that you know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Okay, so let's do it. Do it. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I actually, hold on, I apologize. Just give me one more second. Okay. Sorry, it's taking me a little bit longer than I expected to. Oh, shoot. I'm assuming you can't see all of this screen. Is that correct? Oh,
Not all of it's very pretty.
okay. Sorry about that. I'm just going to do it this way. I'm tired of messing around with it. It's late. It's Tuesday. Kind of over it. Okay. All right. So everybody can see everything. All right. The problem with this and how I share my screen, it makes it problematic because I can't see the chat. And so if somebody wouldn't mind being a chat person, Samsara, I don't know if that's something that you can do, but it's hard for me to manage chat and this, if that's okay.
I will do my best.
Okay.
I'm sure
All right.
my assistant.
I'll back you up, Samsara.
Awesome. And hey, you know what? I am definitely not that person to where like you can only ask me questions within certain periods of time. Jump in there. This is about discussion and sharing ideas and a conversation. You and I we are all on the equal playing field. I just happen to know a lot about lactation. That doesn't mean that you don't know a lot about lactation. So let's talk about lactation. Okay. I also know that it's late on a Tuesday, and it's been a pretty intense couple of weeks for everybody. So we're going to be really nice to ourselves, and we're going to do breaks. You are an adult. If you need to take a break, walk away. This is being recorded. I will probably take a break in about an hour. So I know that some people need to know, like, Jesus, when is this going to end? So I'll probably break in about an hour. Should you need anything else, please holla. Okay. Okay. So today, today I'm not going to get through all of these objectives because I know that we're going to get together again next week, but I'm going to try and plow through as much as I can. And what I'm going to talk about is really what's involved in milk production, what is in milk, and what makes it so much more special. What are common concerns related to breastfeeding and chest feeding? We're going to go over different positionings and what does an effective latch look like and why that's important. And then finally go over some myths and barriers that pertain to lactation. So human milk in and of itself is a dynamic fluid. It constantly is changing from morning to afternoon to evening. It's changing from healthy baby to sick baby. It's changing from healthy person to sick person. And information and research is now beginning to show that it's even changing from right breast and chest to left breast and chest. So things are constantly changing with it. And that's what makes it so special. When we talk about milk, really there are two different types of milk that I want you to be aware of. And they have two separate names and they have two different types of functions. So it's really important you understand the distinction between the two. The first is colostrum. Colostrum is milk that you're going to find within those first 0 to 3 to 0 to 5 days of life. Now, of course, I'm not talking about 0 to 3, 0 to 5 days of life for person. I'm talking about 0 to 3 to 0 to 5 days of life for infant. And that's another really cool thing that you're going to see me kind of bounce back and forth with when I talk about lactation. Days of life of infant and postpartum for the birthing person, because really the two of them are connected. And even though one has kind of shifted away, we really need to stay focused on that dyad, and lactation really is based on that relationship with that dyad. And I hope that everybody understands what I mean by dyad, that couple, the birthing person and the infant. So colostrum is what you're going to see in those first 0 to 3 to 0 to 5 days of life of the infant. Colostrum has really 4 really important qualities that both baby needs and both person need. The first is that colostrum is rich in immunologic components. So what does that mean? It means that baby has gone from a sterile environment and has passed through, however it is passed, via a
Lost
Darn
her.
it,
Lost her.
darn it.
She'll be back.
I'll chat her. Hold on. Oh, she can't hear the chat. Oops.
She'll figure it out. We're all educated about Zoom by now. She was talking about how dynamic breast milk is so dynamic it bopped her off the internet.
can't. Oh, I can't. I don't know.
Yeah, see Laura's
We'll
chair.
see.
No Laura.
Oh, no. You guys hear me now?
Yes, you're back. Uh-oh. Are you there, Laura? Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm gonna change over just one more time, and you may lose me. So hold on just 1 second. I'm gonna
No
try
problem.
one more thing,
Go for it.
and then.
I got it all together, but I'm talking.
Okay, babe.
So folks, please mute yourself.
I think very windy.
Julia, please mute yourself. Thank you. I don't want to start a conversation because as soon as I do, she'll be back. So then that'll mess up our conversation. But it's nice to see all your beautiful faces.
It's good to see you.
Oh, Laura's coming back.
I think I got it. I think I got it under control. We'll see. But does this seem better? Does the connection seem a little better?
You seem
Right?
Seem a
It
lot.
does seem a little better, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Whew. Back to colostrum.
Come on, y'all. Okay, here we go. I know, we just got to get through it. Got to get through today. Tomorrow's going to be a great day. Just got to
Oh
keep
my
moving.
Lord.
All right, here we go. Colostrum. Let's share screen again. Let's go back into it. Share. Okay. Everybody with me? Everybody see me and hear me? Okay. So I don't know where I left off. I know we were talking about colostrum and that there are 4 important things. Okay. So this is a good review anyway. I didn't get too far. 4 important things about colostrum. Remembering that colostrum is only going to be present between the day of life 0 to 3 to 0 to 5 of that infant. And we'll go more into detail about that later. But there are 4 important things about why colostrum is needed. The first is that it's rich in immunological components. So we have to think about that, the baby or fetus has been in a very sterile environment and is going to be going through a very non-sterile environment. So however that is, via section birth or vaginal, right? And because it's going through a non-sterile environment, and it was in a sterile environment, it needs as much help as it can to acclimate to its new environment, to its earth side, right? So as soon as baby becomes earth side, we need to try and push as much immunological components in that infant to help protect that infant as it starts to acclimate to its new surroundings. So that's a very huge benefit for colostrum. The second is that it helps close the infant gut. I'm going to shut the door. I'm going to keep talking though. What I mean by closing the infant gut is that infants, like I said, are in a sterile environment, but that sterile environment is also aqueous, meaning it's fluid, right? And because it's fluid, parts of the colon and the intestines are porous. Now, I'm not talking about like huge, gigantic holes in this person's intestines, but I am saying that there's these microscopic holes that are lining the colon and the intestines of the infant. Now, when we're talking about these holes, the objective of any formula, whether it be a bovine derived formula or a plant derived formula or a human milk, the proteins in that formula are meant to, or in that milk, are meant to go into those holes of the intestines and fill them. And the reason being is that if you have protein there, it protects that gut. If you have bacteria that goes into those holes, what ends up happening is that bacteria proliferates and causes a bacterial infection. So, and the reason why it does that is because obviously colon is, and your intestines, it's dark, it's warm, it has food. And if we're talking about preterm infants or preemie infants, this is a huge risk that can cause death because it's a huge infection. And so with any formula, whether it be, like I said, a plant derived formula or a bovine, meaning like, or a cow or a goat or however else we want to get formula milk from, those proteins will do that. But the proteins are not a perfect fit. And so they go to try to fill that hole, but it's like putting a square peg in a circle hole, right? There's going to be bits and pieces where bacteria can still go and form and proliferate. It won't be as big and the risk is not as great, but it still is a risk. Human milk is made for human babies. Therefore, those proteins are perfectly fit to go into those holes and create a smooth protected surface within that intestine and within that gut. This is just another protective factor that colostrum, specifically colostrum, provides for our brand new babies, preterm or not, okay? The third thing that I want you to remember about colostrum is that we have a small amount for an immature digestive system. Remember that this infant it was never meant in utero to take in food or solids or anything. It has been eating through its umbilical cord. It's been getting nutrients and oxygen and all the things it needs from the umbilical cord connected to the placenta. It does not get food directly in through the mouth, through that gastrointestinal tract. So colostrum is that first beginning process of starting peristalsis, starting the mouth to move, saliva to be released, something traveling down the esophagus, going into the stomach, processing that, moving in from the small intestines to the large intestines, through the colon and out the butt, right? That is the objective of peristalsis, getting that colon and getting those small intestines to move everything around. And so colostrum starts that process. Finally, the fourth thing that I want you to remember about colostrum is meconium. And this is probably one of the biggest things that you can physically see as a doula or as a parent or as a provider or as a nurse, as anything, is meconium and getting those first poopies out. This is super important because one, again, it kind of finishes, it's almost like that signal that's saying, okay, peristalsis and the GI tract is starting to work, and it's starting to work on its own. And that's a great sign, right? I want to see that. Another thing, though, is that meconium is extremely important in that it helps shed dead red blood cells. Now, all of us shed dead red blood cells in our poopy. This is how our system works. Our liver helps this process happen. It takes our dead red blood cells and it processes them and puts them in our poopy. And that's the reason why your poopy is the color it is. And I like saying poopy. I think it's a lot of fun. But that's the reason why it's the color it is. And that's why you should check it. Every time you go, you should look and see what color is it, what consistency is it, and if the color shifts and changes a little bit, that's okay, especially if you eat beets. You have to remind yourself that you ate beets. But then for the most part, it should relatively stay the same color, and that's because you're constantly shedding those dead red blood cells. If you are unable to shed dead red blood cells, then you increase your risk of jaundice. And I'll go a little bit more into what jaundice is, but for infants, especially preterm infants, if the body is unable to get rid of those dead red blood cells, then we increase our risk of jaundice. And if we have a preterm infant, that's kind of setting this infant up for a cascade of issues that could be problematic over time. Okay, so 4 things about colostrum. The first is, can anybody give me a shout out about what maybe the first one would be about colostrum, or in the chat? I can't see the chat. Is there anything in there?
The first one was the immunological properties of it.
Yeah, exactly. The immunological components. That's right. That we're setting that infant up for success for however it traveled out of this birthing person and into Earthside, into the world. That we're setting that infant up to protect it from everything that it's going to be exposed to wherever it was born. What's another one? Can anybody remember another one?
Helps to close the gut of the baby, which is still developing digestive tract.
Yes, Jocelyn, so nice to see your beautiful face.
Thank you.
She is so cute, cute, cute. Yes, perfect. Close the infant gut. Exactly, to protect that infant. Anybody else want to throw out a third one?
It moves meconium.
Meconium poopy. That's right. We have to get rid of that poopy because we want to get rid of those dead red blood cells. The increase of dead red blood cells in a system puts you at risk for jaundice, and we'll go a little bit more into what that's going to look like later. Exactly. Anybody want to remember the fourth one? Did I even go over the fourth one? I did go over the fourth one, right? Oh, let's recap just in case. The fourth one is a small amount for a small digestive system. So remember that we have this digestive system that's just now beginning to learn how to function, learning how to get that peristalsis going. And so I'm only going to have a small amount, so it continues to learn how to practice. The issue with the small amount, though, and this is a big takeaway for both parents and doulas and nurses and physicians, is that small amounts mean I'm going to have way more frequent feedings. So I'm not going to have an infant a newborn specifically, is not going to stay at breast or chest for 30 or 40 minutes actively nursing. They are going to be staying on breast or chest maybe 10 minutes. Right? And then they'll be full, but then they'll be hungry or they'll be showing infant feeding signs way earlier than say a 3-month-old baby. So where you could have maybe 2-hour window between each feedings. For a newborn, you could see babies nurse every hour, right? Because they have those shorter durations, but more frequent feedings. Okay, so just remember small amounts that person is going to produce, because babies don't need a lot, but they're going to be going back to the bar a lot more frequently. Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns about colostrum?
There's a question about freezing colostrum if the baby separated from the mom. Can we freeze colostrum?
That's a great question. Yes, you can freeze it. Of course, anytime you freeze or heat, add heat, it will denature some proteins, but that does not mean that it's still not useful and needed. So you absolutely can freeze it and you can store it. You'll find, I'll try to cover it in the time that we're together, but you will also find in that student guide, there's a whole graph of how to store milk, and that also applies to colostrum. So you can put it in the refrigerator, you can put it in the freezer, and of course you can warm it up as well. That's an excellent question. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns?
I have a question.
Yes.
It all stems from being a parent, because I have a 3-year-old, and I'm wondering, in those first days when my daughter was born, they would nurse for hours on end. They wanted to just suck, and I'm wondering, are they still getting colostrum, or are they just using that ¿cómo se dice?
The sucking mechanism, right? Their mouth, right? Yes, yeah. That's an excellent question. Oh my gosh. And it's almost perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about next. But yes, so especially in those early days, and this will reinforce what I'm going to talk about later, in those early days, especially between the days of life 0 to 5, I encourage that. I call it snursing, to where you're kind of snoozing and you're kind of nursing, because it's doing a plethora of things, right? It's establishing your milk supply, and I'll talk more about that and what that looks like. And it's also providing skin to skin or your body closeness, and that's regulation, both for baby, for temperature, but also for just keeping the stress level way down. You have to remember that these people have been this dyad has been connected, and for one of the people connected within this dyad, it's all they know. All they know is that heartbeat, that voice sound, that smell. They know nothing else. And so the more they're with that sound, that smell, that that taste, all of those sensory things to reaffirm that they are safe and they are connected, the better off it is for both. Because what that's also doing is that's also regulating the birth person, right? That's keeping their stress level down. It's keeping that oxytocin flooding, because that baby's oh so cute and squishy and warm, and they smell so good, right? Everybody loves the way a baby smells, and that's for design. That's designed for a reason. So it's really a regulatory body to keep that dyad together.
If I can add something, Laura, real quick.
Please do. Yes, please.
It's something that we'll see a lot as doulas. The mama's thinking that the little one is not getting enough food because it's hungry all the time. So I'm not making enough milk because my baby's hungry all the time. And one of the first things we reassure them about is that is baby pooping, is baby peeing, you know, that their nursing is so much more than just acquisition of food, right? And Laura's going to talk more about what all that's about, but that's an important thing that we can reassure the parent that no, it's not that, you know, baby's gaining weight, baby's pooping and peeing, but baby wants to be on you all the time. Modern parents are kind of flipped out about that connection and how powerful it is. You know, every other gift they've gotten for their baby shower is something that they can put the baby away from their body. And the point is that baby needs to be on your body, smelling, sensing, and as Laura said, the mom is the parent is the homepage for the child. The child knows nothing else. So the poor kid is kind of lost. And then one of the responses to that is that the kid can sleep. And the parent goes, oh, that's great, he's asleep. Well, you know, the kid's trying to get away from stress in that sleep. That's not a peaceful sleep. That's like, I don't know where I am. This is horrible. I'm going to disconnect. You know, so we're trying to help parents kind of know what that is and to give way to their natural desire to have the baby on them all the time and just stare into their baby's eyes all the time. So that's going to really help baby recover and mommy make lots of milk.
Exactly. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns before we move away from colostrum? Okay, jump in anytime. So just so you can have a comparison of what this looks like, especially when it comes to the immunoglobulins, I really wanted to just kind of take that home with this graph here. It is, you can see here, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but the 19 here, right, that's profound in comparison to the 0.1 that you're going to find in just human breast milk, or what I like to refer to as mature milk. And so again, this is the reason why we have colostrum. And I kind of want to take a step back and recognize that there's a variety of different thought processes and ideologies and cultural standings in regards to colostrum. Some cultures and belief systems feel that colostrum is something to be discarded until the mature milk comes in. And I, for one, of course, will never want to say we shouldn't acknowledge or allow space for those cultural interpretations of what this is. But also as a lactation educator and as a nurse, it is it's my due diligence to inform you that colostrum does have a reason. It does have a purpose, and there's a reason why this is here before we get to mature milk. Right. And it was exactly what I said. We're slamming that baby with a bunch of immunoglobulins to really protect it. We're trying to close that infant gut again to protect it, to set this baby up for success and shed those dead red blood cells, because we want to reduce our risk of jaundice. And again, to reemphasize that we're going to have smaller amounts and we're going to have more frequent feedings, not for long times, but more frequent feedings. Okay, and you're going to see a little bit of a fat difference. The lactose, which is the primary sugar found in all milk, a little bit different. You're going to have higher fats and higher sugars in mature milk because fat is what's for brain development. So I want to have a higher fat content in my mature milk. You're going to have calcium, phosphorus, and sodium. These are all things that are needed for healthy cell function. So they're not going to be much different because cells just kind of function on this kind of stuff anyway. Anybody have any questions or concerns? I'm going to kind of plow through this because you have all of this in your study guide, and you can read, so you don't need me to read it to you. This just kind of talks a little bit about what mature milk, or what we know about milk, which, to be very honest, is very, very little. We know an obscene amount about how to support a lactating person. We know an obscene amount about pumping. We know an obscene amount about lactation as an act, but we don't know, we don't know what's in mature milk. We don't know why it's different than formula, and we don't know to the extent of its differences. And so what we do know, though, is super profound, and I tried to list a little bit of it. So mature milk has natural trans fats. These are what are known to help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. So already from the jump, you are reducing this baby's risk of cardiovascular disease, which is profound, especially in certain communities, right? In certain communities, cardiovascular disease is rampant, right? This is already starting to combat that from the jump. There's principal proteins called hamlet. And so what these proteins do is research is showing that they kill tumor cells. The research that I have listed in the student guide talks about hamlet being exposed to lung cancer, lung tumors. And what they found was not only was hamlet killing the tumor cells, but it was repairing this other cells that were damaged in this process. So it is really just creating a clean slate when it comes to this. And there's now more research talking about giving people that have specific tumors, breast milk, to help combat this. And we're talking about adults getting breast milk in the hospital, which is just super awesome. Breast milk has circadian variations. This is really kind of the idea that helping baby realize through hormones and through milk that, you know, it's daytime and it's nighttime. That didn't really work well with my kids, but it might well work with your kids. Okay, let's see. We also have known that mother's milks have endocannabinoids. So just to kind of get a refresher of what endocannabinoids are, endocannabinoids obviously have nothing to do with marijuana, but the same guy that discovered cannabis, or discovered its properties, more specifically THC and the psychoactive properties of THC, also discovered this system within our body that really its purpose is to regulate. It regulates our temperature, it regulates hunger, it regulates a lot of different various parts of our body. And these endocannabinoids are all throughout our system, in our hands and in our feet and in our brain and within our intestinal tract. It's actually a quite interesting science. I encourage you to read about it when you have time. So this is what we're talking about with endocannabinoids in terms of mature milk, is that this comes back to that whole idea that you can't overfeed a breastfed baby. And that is very true. You can't overfeed a breastfed baby directly from the tap. You can overfeed a breastfed baby via bottle. If you're giving a baby breast milk through a bottle, they absolutely can be overfed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if baby is getting milk directly from the tap, then that's exactly correct. You cannot overfeed a breastfed baby. Pretty cool stuff. Breast milk isn't sterile, contains about 600 different types of various bacteria, and that's pretty amazing. To kind of go back a minute, to kind of tie these two ideas together, colostrum and mature milk, one of the coolest things is that, remember a minute ago I was talking about how it lines your intestinal tract to cover those holes, but it also does a really awesome thing as well. what happens is it takes these really complex sugars so that when bacteria does go through the intestinal tract, it attaches to those complex sugars, because remember, bacteria like sugar. And then what those complex sugars do is they detach from the colon and they get flushed out of the system. This is almost like a decoy system to help protect infant. It not only is a decoy system though, what they're discovering is that it's teaching the immune system how to work. So there's that theory, right, that if I breastfeed or chest feed my baby, that I'll be passing off my immunity to this baby. And kind of, because we talked about what you're getting in colostrum, but what they're also now discovering is that not only are we giving immunity to this baby, but we're teaching this immune system how to work. And I mean, that's profound. It's profound on so many levels, but one of the biggest takeaways from this is no matter how long you breast or chest feed, that immune system has learned. So you could only have breastfed for 3 weeks, and you could like you'll counsel people and be like, oh, I only breastfed for 3 weeks. I feel so bad about that. I wish I could have done more. But you have taught this system how to work. You have taught it how to work, and that information is never lost. So it is, however long someone breast or chest feeds, it makes a huge impact on that infant's immune system to learn how to function in the world that we live in now. So it's a big deal. Anybody have any questions or concerns about that?
I got a question. We recently have a client whose little one was really anxious to get out in the world with us. So baby was about a month early. So, really hard, luckily not a lot of NICU time, but, baby's gotten some human milk, gotten some milk from mommy, gotten some milk from donors, gotten a little formula. I'm just wondering about this process of the immune system when the baby has had so much shifting going on in its first month of life that was early.
So, I mean, what I really like to pull from anytime somebody asks me a question, of course, is I try to pull from evidence-based research. What do we know about our 36-weekers? I had a 36-weeker, and 36-weekers kind of are on the cusp, right? They're your preterm term babies, right? They're kind of preemies, but they're kind of not. They kind of can suck, but they kind of can't. They kind of can breathe on their own, but then they kind of can't, right? So they're in this really weird matrix of a world of I can or cannot. What I do know is that either via donor milk or breast milk, all of those things are setting baby up for success. Every time, no doubt, no question in my mind. Now, if baby gets formula, there's really no issue with formula other than it lacks a lot of these properties that I've shared with you today. Formula is still formula is a tool. It's a valuable tool. And without it, babies would die,
Right.
period. Right. So I would say that I feel that there's a lot of benefit that this baby's getting, not only from its own person's milk, but it's getting benefits from other donor milk, right? It's getting exposure from other different environments. And I feel like that's a great thing. So I think that really, I think that those were all great things. I don't imagine that that's going to cause a huge upheaval in terms of gastrointestinal issues or risks because of that mature milk. Did I answer that concern?
You touched on it, and I think you're thinking going to touch on it more just organically. I'm also having some questions about, we want to, it's been hard having this little one on the breast.
Yeah.
And
they have a hard time figuring it out, I think. And that's one of the big takeaways with our 36-weekers and even younger is that getting the grasp of that suck reflex is a challenge, and they're right at that cusp, which is the problem, right? That if they would have been able to cook for another month, then that reflex would have been a lot more ingrained in their process, but it's not quite there, especially for some versus others. So that will come with time, but it will come with practice. And unfortunately, at times it can come at the cost of that birthing person's chest or breast, their nipples specifically. So that would be my first like big takeaway, is worry about trauma to those nipples.
Meaning making sure baby has good latch. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That would be the big takeaway. Yeah. And I agree. I think in this lecture, we'll kind of like broad stroke over a lot of those different things that baby is going to have to overcome over time. Both the dyad are going to have to overcome over time on their terms.
Right. And then I think one of the reasons I'm bringing it up too is like, this is not an impossible situation. This little one can totally learn.
Totally.
But it is going to be a full-time job working with this little one and helping the baby to learn.
Yep. It's definitely, everybody's going to have to use their patience tool. That's a thing that we've been doing a lot. This is something that we've been doing at home a lot too. Use your patience tool. And sometimes that tool is hard to find. But that's going to be the big kicker for that one for sure.
But not impossible.
No, nope, not impossible. Okay.
So but just to say, we are 4 minutes to 7 o'clock, so we can take our first little mini break.
Okay.
If you wanted to, you were going to say something, but just take a little 5-minute stretch break, bathroom break, and then come right back.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is if anybody has any questions, I feel like in the break you can type it down in the chat or write it down, and then when we come back, I'll definitely tackle it. Okay, so I have 7. Can we do 7:05? I have does that work for you?
I'm going to tell Siri to ring at 7:05.
All right, I'll see y'all at 7:05. Share.
Hey Siri. Alarm at 7:05 p.m.
Your alarm is set for 19:05.
Want to say hi to some sunlight?
Oh, it's my little favorite fur boy. My second favorite fur boy, because Django was watching.
Don't let Django hear you.
I know, he gets jealous. He gets jelly.
He's getting big.
He's cute as he wants.
And he's like too friendly. He like sits on strangers' feet like 2 minutes after he meets them.
Boundaries, little man. He's so cute. Oh, oh dear Lord. Good deal. I will be right back. Okay, for folks who are just signing in right now, we're on a little bit of a break. We will be back in session in about 4 minutes, so just hang out there. Thank you for being with us. There is a student guide that's a Google Doc that's going to be made available to all the students taking this workshop today. So what you missed will be in that student guide. And I'm glad you're here now. So again, to folks who just joined us, you joined us in the middle of a break. Welcome. The break will be over in about 3 minutes, and we'll get back to talking about what we've been talking about, which is breastfeeding, chest feeding, and lactation. There will be a student guide available so you can read up on what you missed. We started at 6, and we're just taking our first break. We will be ending at 9, probably a little bit after, because we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. But welcome, glad you're here.
Samsara, has the second part, the date and time, been announced? I don't know that I
It's in
saw
the
that.
same. It's in the same event.
Okay.
Yeah, it's next Tuesday, the same time.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
What are you eating, Jesslyn? Oh my Lord.
Burrito.
Oh my goodness. It looks so good. I hope everybody's taking care of themselves with regard to food and drink, because this is dinner time for a lot of folks, and definitely have no problem with people. Shiphrahs Circle when we used to meet in person in the days before COVID, we would always get together, and our meetings were always dinner meetings. So we're always eating food, sharing food is a big part of learning as far as I'm concerned, a big part of processing information. So I encourage people to eat. Eat, eat, eat.
Learned an interesting fact earlier today about breastfeeding I can share.
Go ahead.
Which is not surprising to you, but in observations of more traditional societies from various African countries, average feeding is like 2 to 5 times per hour in the beginning, and that's just like normal and no one questions that. And like feeding on demand is 2 to 5 times an hour,
right?
Little.
Right.
And then here we're like 2 or 3 hours, once every 2 or 3 hours. It's just,
and we wonder why
how different that is.
And we wonder why things go afoul for so many families, you know?
Right.
Like breastfeeding is a thing that sometimes you just can overcome, and the little one's just voracious enough to overcome the fact that we do it so poorly in this society. And but then some folks, you know, it just creates much more of a stress. And then mama's the feeling like just this last week, I had a client where she called me all in a tizzy and in tears, and you know, I'm poor mama, what's going on? And the baby's all cranky and crying, and she's exhausted, and she's going to go pay a whole bunch of money to get postpartum doula help, and everything's just bizarre. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. And I go, okay, let's take a deep breath. You know, I love you. Hold your baby. Smell the baby. I'm like, what's going on? And like, well, you know, I put the baby in the bassinet, and every time I put the baby in the bassinet, it cries. Like, well, then don't put her in the bassinet. They don't want to be in there then. Your baby's telling you, Mommy, I want to be in your arms. And but what about when I sleep? Why don't just because the doctors are freaking them out about sleeping with their babies. And it's like human mothers have slept with their babies since they, a little bit after the dinosaurs stopped crawling around. So what are we freaking people out about that for? This client, she's like, her milk supply is going down. She's tired. The baby's screaming. One night, she slept one night, snuggled close to her baby, smelling her baby's hair. She woke up in the morning with the breast overflowing with milk. She texted me 20 million happy faces. Baby's been nursing all morning. Baby's happy. She's happy. And it's like, oh, I'm so happy. I sent it smiley faces back, and I'm like, can we relax? I mean, oh my gosh. What I love about what Laura's sharing with us is all this wonderful science that confirms what my grandma told me when I was going to nurse some twins when I was 19. Basically, your girl, don't worry about it. You got 2 boobies, you got 2 babies. They're going to eat. You're going to feed them. Like, no stress, no worry about it. She was like, whatever. And so I was like, okay, well, grandma says whatever, it's going to work out. And guess what? The milk flowed like the spice in the Dune books, and the kids got fed. So much of it is the attitude in which it's presented to the client, and the instilling confidence as opposed to terror in this process. Folks are getting almost as terrified of breastfeeding as they are of birth, which is something. Okay, we are back. Miss Laura's in her chair.
I'm in it. I'm in it to win it.
All right, it's your time. I'm turning it over.
All right, so I'm gonna go back to share, resume share. Okay, everybody can see and do the thing, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Did anybody have any questions when we left off? We talked about, what's colostrum and why it exists, why it's different than mature milk. We talked about some of the components, just some, kind of touched a little bit about that. Anybody have any other questions about that before I move on?
I just had one quick question for
Yes.
moms that don't have the luxury of being able to feed their babies for one reason or another, and they choose formula, and they have the big, should it be goat's milk? Should it be cow's milk? Is there a real, difference, or?
I mean, the only difference is what you're going to find is the different types of protein. Now, this is kind of a loaded question, and I'm only going to kind of breeze on top of it just in terms of time, right? But really, I mean, we've been using animal-derived formulas for, quite some time, whether they come from goats or whether they come from cows. Some people say that proteins in goats are a little bit closer to our protein size, and that could be a little bit more healthful. Really what it breaks down to is what can the baby tolerate, right? What is that baby's ability to digest and process? And so does that mean that they need a plant-derived formula, being usually it's soy, like a soy-based formula, or is, something else going to help that baby digest? And so really that's got to be the big kicker. And then secondary to that is what can that person afford? Because this is something you're going to have to pay for. And so some of these are more expensive than others. So then that's going to play a role in it as well. So those are the 2 factors I think are like the tip top, like big block answers to those questions. And of course we can go into an entire other class, about this, but that would be,
Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns? And again, a big takeaway, right? I am not anti-formula by any means. Like I said before, it's a tool. It's a tool that saves lives. I like tools and I like saving lives. Those are all pluses in my book. So I'm not anti-formula by any means, but there's a time and a place, right? Just like the song. Okay. if there aren't any other questions or concerns, I'd like to move forward. IgA, so when we talk about immune system, and I'm just going to briefly talk about this because time and everything else. When we talk about our immune system is derived of a variety of big players that kind of make up what protects us or what defines an immune system. For lactation, specifically in the world of lactation, IgA is found in our mucosal system. So it's an antibody that goes and helps protect us against attacks of bacteria or virus or whatever. And you're going to find those predominantly in your mucosal system. So your mouth, your nose, your lungs, your throat, and in this case, in your breast or chest. Now, IgA levels differ, and that's kind of what this talks about. And this is something that you can read on your own. And it's also in your student guide, both where I got the data and more information. But really what this is talking about is secretion of IgA levels. One study showed that over time, IgA levels shifted between right breast and chest and left breast and chest, and that shift happened throughout the day. So for example, in the morning, you could have higher IgA levels in your left chest and lower IgA levels in your right chest, but then in the afternoon, it will switch. And then in the evening, it will be equal, right? And there was no rhyme or reason for it. There wasn't something that made it like, well, it was because this person was under stress or because this person was eating cauliflower, because this happened. They didn't know why. And I thought that that was a really interesting point to take, that there's something, a feedback loop that's happening between infant and our systems that are having a conversation with each other. And we're not really quite sure to the extent of that conversation, which is super cool. The second thing that I wanted you to understand was that when we talk about IgA levels, when I first started breastfeeding, like Samsara had mentioned, I had a 36-weeker. He was a little itty bitty dude. He's no longer an itty bitty dude, but he was. When I first started, and we were talking about vaccinations, there were a variety of pediatricians, even here in the Bay Area, that were saying that we were recommending that we discontinue breastfeeding for 24 hours after a vaccination. And the thought process is that the breast milk or mature milk was fighting the vaccine, rendering it not as useful. Right? That it was almost like creating this barrier between the person's immune system, the baby's immune system, and the milk, and making it to where that vaccine was not as efficient, not as efficient as it should have been. Well, that sounds silly, but as a parent, of course, you're going to be like, well, my pediatrician knows, and that of course sets up a whole other bit of issues in terms of stopping or discontinuing breastfeeding and chest feeding for 24 hours. And I'll go a little bit more into what that would look like later. But because of this, a lot of research was brought up, both here and across the pond. So both here and in the UK, they talked about how IgA levels specifically with vaccines. And what they found was similar to what I had just shared with you about colostrum. When somebody was exposed to vaccines, they found that a breastfed baby's immune system reacted faster and stronger in comparison to their formula-fed counterparts. Now, that's pretty awesome. The big takeaway, though, is how long does that last? I don't know. Right? Because you hear a lot of breastfed babies that grew up to be adults have to go and get titers or have to go get revaccinated because they didn't have a strong enough immune reaction to the initial vaccine. There's a whole other plethora of stuff that goes on, but these studies that I put in your reference guide kind of reference that specifically, the immune system reaction between a breastfed baby versus a formula-fed baby. Anybody have any questions or concerns? Just going to do a quick kind of takeaway in terms of what we know about COVID. I'm Italian, so I pulled it from the Italian Society of Neonatology because I just have to represent, right? Keeping it real. Definitely. And what we know right now, is that there is no horizontal transmission of COVID. So horizontal meaning from person to infant, right? As opposed to vertical. You and I, if we were in person, that would be a vertical transmission. But that horizontal transmission isn't happening, meaning baby in utero, fetus in utero is not getting COVID, and it's not getting COVID when it's born. However it's born, via section or vaginal. We also know that that transmission is not happening in breast milk. We know that because we've had positive COVID patients that have breastfed their babies, and those babies turned out to be COVID negative or did not test positive for a COVID test. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening here, and I'm sure that you, as doulas that are in this class, can share. I can't even imagine the kind of hoops that they've had to jump through, and Samsara can also share of what that's looked like as well. And you're seeing that also in terms of lactation, where the dyad is separated and they're not allowed to even room together in the same room. Each country is different. Each county is different. Each state is different. So there's a lot of moving parts that are happening here, and lots of institutions that have separate laws and regulations that differ from the blanket rule from the CDC. The CDC is saying you can nurse, you can breastfeed and chest feed with COVID. Mic drop, walk it away.
And the World Health Organization.
And the World Health Organization. That's correct. Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that until and in my mind, I kind of have a lot of money on the World Health Organization. That is a separate entity, separate from our CDC, and they have a lot of data. And at this point, they're saying let's continue to breast and chest feed, and I say let's do that. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody have any questions or concerns about what I've spoken about thus far?
Neither a question or concern, but I just wanted to add that I was in a seminar this morning out of New York State, looking at all the studies that are coming in from some were from Canada, of course, some from China around breastfeeding, and just applauding what a benefit this is for the babies.
Yeah,
to stay
awesome.
on, and the protections that these infants are getting seem to be pretty off the chart, very exciting, to the extent that they're starting to study breast milk from folks who were COVID infected to see if there's some magical product that they could make that could also protect others.
I think I read something similar to that, and I probably posted it on my Facebook with some kind of caption saying, now everybody wants my milkshake in the yard, right? Because
right.
Now
Right.
All right. Super inappropriate, but you know, that's what you got to do. Okay.
Sorry, I just that just so I can understand the takeaway from this, and what I've been reading is also that of the few mothers who were COVID positive, who the newborns were COVID positive, they were like very symptomatic, and even then they weren't sure if it was the breast milk that made the newborn sick. Is that what I'm understanding? Like it's
I think that's the big takeaway. I have not seen any data saying that babies have become COVID positive via breast milk or more mature milk transmission. That there were other factors that came into play in terms of how they got positive. But again, I also can say now there's far more people getting sick, and now there's different mutations. So
that's true. Yes.
The best thing I can recommend at this point is to stay abreast of what the World Health Organization knows and recommends, stay abreast of the CDC, and also know that those hospital institutions are going to have their own internal regulating bodies. So albeit the CDC and the WHO are going to say, yo, it's all good, you're going to have some random Kaiser out in the middle of nowhere that's going to say, nah, we're not going to let you do that. Right. And then that
it's also important for parents to know that they can push back on that, because hospital regulations are not laws.
You know, I have a mom right now that gave birth and then went home, came back, had to go back to the hospital, and she's not being allowed to see her baby or breastfeed her baby while she's in the hospital.
And I think that's another thing to big takeaway as well, right? I think that in terms of fighting for your rights with specific hospitals are going to be especially more difficult within certain populations, right? If we have an African American or Black mom go to a hospital and try and fight, now we're going to have Child Protective Services be aware. I'm not saying that you shouldn't fight. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But what I am saying is that you should be prepared, right? In whatever fashion you should. And that's something that we should be aware of as a doula. If you're going to go in there for that fight, then you better have access to a lawyer. How can we make sure that Child Protective Services aren't involved? And to be honest, I'm sure that Child CPS isn't going to do anything. It's a pandemic. Nobody knows what they're doing. But again, it's trauma. Do we need to add trauma to this?
Exactly.
So all things to consider. And again, I'm not doing all this research. I don't have all the answers. We do know that there are institutions like the World Health Organization that do, right? So let's, stick with what we know, stick with the data. And again, just like what you all are doing, going out there and supporting your people and making sure everybody has access. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns before we move forward?
Here and in the UK, they talked.
Oh, that was me. Oh,
With you.
listening to this, listening to the sound of
Your
my
own dulcet tones. I know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So benefits of breastfeeding and chest feeding. I like this one. No need to boil, cannot be stolen, available when needed, and stored in attractive containers. I 1000% agree. So back in our previous administration, we had an amazing Surgeon General by the name of Dr. Regina Benjamin. And what this person did was pretty profound, especially in the world of lactation. And she did this by asking just one question: what happens if we don't breastfeed or chest feed? And because she did this, a plethora of research and funding went into what happens if we don't, which included what is in breast milk and chest milk, what is in mature milk, and what is in colostrum that makes it so much more beneficial. What are the long-term costs? And more specifically, what are the excess health risks? So what you're looking at here, and I'm just going to briefly kind of go over this, is that everybody born, every baby has a certain risk of getting something. A baby has a risk of getting asthma with a family history of asthma. A baby has a risk of getting type 2 diabetes, right? A baby has a risk, especially in other countries, of having diarrhea. As a matter of fact, diarrhea to this day is, I think, the third leading cause of death.
Absolutely.
Today in 2021, people are dying of diarrhea.
Yeah.
And so you have this risk of getting these. Now, what Dr. Regina Benjamin asked was, what are the excess risks? What are the risks on top of the already inherent risks of a baby getting something like this, like an acute ear infection, eczema, childhood obesity? What are those risks? And do they increase if they don't get milk, if they don't get human milk? Right? And so that's the graph that you're looking at now. The necrotizing enterocolitis, that is the bacterial infection that I brought up to you way at the beginning of this, that where the porous holes in the colon and the bacteria goes in there. That's what ends up happening. And that is what's going to kill your preterm infants. The breastfed baby and the breastfed toddler, two big takeaways from this is that, and I get this question asked a lot, what all of the things that happen in the breast and chest fed baby section are also with addition to the breastfed toddler. So that breast and chest fed toddler got all the beautiful things that came with those within the baby category, but now in addition to, the toddler gets those things, right? One of the big comments that I hear when it comes to toddlers, and maybe you have heard from your family or within your community circles, is, I'm not going to breast or chest feed once baby asks for it. I'm not going to breast or chest feed when baby has teeth, right? All of these things are showing signs of maturity and that milk is no longer needed. And research is beginning to show that that's not necessarily the case, right? In the second year of life, mature milk still provides quite a bit of nutrients that will help sustain that infant as they start to continue to navigate table food. If you've ever sat down with a 1-year-old to try to get them to eat their broccoli or to have a well-balanced diet, good luck. It never worked out for me. And so it's always good to have that mature milk backup to continue to set this infant up for success. Finally, the one thing I wanted to bring up as well is as baby starts to mature and move away from the breast and chest, immune factors continue to increase once our milk making system has been notified that we're not taking in enough as much milk as we used to. So as supplies start to drop, immune factors start to increase. So it's almost like our breasts and our chests are holding on for that last bit of limelight, and they're going to go out with a big bang and just be like, oh, I gave my baby so much and now I'm going to give it all I got right in those last few months or years that they have left to nurse. Anybody have any questions or concerns? All right, well, known benefits for breastfeeding for a mother. Again, I kind of crossed out mother because I want to be inclusive. I may not be speaking with a mother. I may be speaking with a birthing person. I may be speaking with a father that's chest feeding. Know your audience and know who you're supporting, right? So psychological benefits, including a feeling of empowerment and development of a strong human bond between mother and infant. This sentence in and of itself was something that I grapple with every time I see this slide. I want to like cross it out. I want to X mark it. But I also leave it because I want to create this almost dialogue or an understanding of the multifaceted components of lactation. So I don't agree that a person that chooses to formula feed will not have these benefits, right? A person that chooses to formula feed their baby will still have a feeling of empowerment, and they will also have a strong bond with their baby, for sure. It's those people that went out to try and chest and breastfeed and failed and took on this amount of guilt or shame that they were unable to do something that was so natural, that then they wouldn't have a feeling of empowerment with when you talk about lactation. And so I think it's very important to understand that there are lots of feelings that come with this experience. And especially when we preface lactation to be easy and natural and the best thing for you to do for your infant, right? It's not easy. And sometimes it's awful. And if we don't start supporting our people, then they are being left with this impression that they failed. And that's something that we really need to take a step back on.
That's a really, really important point, Laura. I'm so glad you always say all the important things. In our culture, breastfeeding is not easy. No. And so we should not be surprised that it is not easy.
That's right.
You know, the systems are not in place to make breastfeeding easy. With moms having to go back to work 4 weeks after they give birth and all of this, you know, and the mindset, the intergenerational mindset now is so geared around bottle feeding. If we had balance and we saw both, and you know, it would be easier. And so individual parents shouldn't blame themselves. They didn't create the society that we live in, you know?
No, but I also would like to say that for some groups, it's even harder, right? Yes. So for our Black and our African American community members, they have been set up to fail in terms of lactation for, it goes 400 years, right? It has been a system of oppression, and especially when it comes to lactation, when we talk about pet milk, when we talk about specific formula marketing for that community. And then also the absolute neglect of the needs of our LGBTQAI community, our trans community that is still trying to find relevance and support, not only in terms of birthing and safety spaces, but also chest feeding and finding support both within their community and within the health system. So it's all loaded.
Absolutely.
It's all loaded.
Something that could possibly be easy is made horribly, terribly difficult.
For the benefit of others. So for the benefit of specific formula companies, for other things, it's not just like hard just to be hard, right? Absolutely. But I will say what we do know about the benefits for those that lactate is definitely a decreased risk of osteoporosis, a reduced risk of premenopausal breast cancer and ovarian cancer, and reduced risk of pregnancy-initiated long-term obesity, among others. There's a cardiovascular reduce of cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, as well as postpartum anemia and postpartum hemorrhage, which is profound, right? Postpartum hemorrhage impacts a certain group way differently than it does others. Black women are dying at 3 times the rate in childbirth than any other populace. And part of that is because of postpartum hemorrhage. Okay. Benefits for society, this really kind of talks about manufacturing pollution, right? So we're not making something in a plastic container, we're not transporting that plastic container all over the world, and we're not throwing away that plastic container to go into landfills. Additionally, though, if 90% of families could comply with medical recommendations, which is to exclusively breast and chest feed for the first 6 months of life, and that's not talking, when we talk about exclusivity, I'm saying no formula, no pacifiers, no bottles. We're talking just straight from the tap for the first 6 months of life. The US can save, I can't see it, $13 billion per year and prevent an excess of 911 deaths. Most of, again, would be infants, and more specifically would fall under that necrotizing enterocolitis. That's really one of the killers that you're going to find, especially within our preterm infants. This is a super cool tool. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it because it's something that you kind of have to go and check out yourself. It's in your study guide, but it's the cost of not breastfeeding. And really what it is, it's a tool for policy makers such as myself. I'm getting a master's in health policy as we speak. And what it talks about is what is the impact in a fiscal space, what is the impact if we don't breast or chest feed? More specifically for lesser developed countries. This allows for a lot more funding and policies to go towards making sure that people are breastfeeding, and more specifically that companies aren't going to pry or to prey on those populace, such as Nestle going in and trying to sell formula and that whole thing. And that's a whole other lecture right in and of itself as well.
Evil. Nestle equals evil.
I know. Treatments. So for the longest time, there are these, and I hate the term, but I don't know a better term to say, old wives' tales, right? That talks about the benefits of, I can't think of it. Yeah, okay. I can't think of another term to use for it, but there are all these old wives' tales that talk about the benefits of milk, right? If you have pink eye, I've had pink eye, I've used breast milk, it's amazing. But when you also talk about eczema, diaper rash, especially if it's not bacterial, right? If it's a yeast infection, don't put milk on it. And same with an eye. If it's a bacterial eye infection, you definitely don't want to put milk on it because milk equals sugar, right? And that's going to make it worse. But there's a plethora of benefits for mature milk. And this is what they call milk therapy. And more research is going to find out, are these really true? Are they really beneficial? And research is beginning to show that, oh man, maybe these people for hundreds of years are onto something.
Gadzooks.
So we talk about the anatomy of breast and chest milk. Really, the big takeaway, right, is that when you pump or hand express mature milk, really what ends up happening is it separates it because we're not homogenized, right? Homogenized meaning that it's shaken and it all stays the same color and it doesn't separate. All milks separate, and they separate into a fatty layer or a creamy layer, and then there's a watery layer on top. Now, for a long time, we were recommending to people to stay on breast, babies need to stay on breast and chest long enough to get the hind milk. Now, the hind milk being milk that's more fatty. And in theory, you're like, I mean, sure, that sounds great. I'll keep baby on long enough for to get the hind milk, right? But in practice, that became super problematic. So I'm going to put my baby on breast and chest, and then I'm going to keep them on long enough to get the hind milk. But how am I going to know that baby is getting the hind milk, right? Is like my nipple going to change color? Is a
Right.
bell going to ring? Like maybe the baby's nose will turn a different color. There's no way that I can quantify that this baby is actually getting the hind milk, right? And so it became this point of almost anxiety. I don't know if my baby's getting enough. I don't know if my baby's getting enough of the hind milk. And I'm fearful of getting this hind milk, fore milk imbalance, which is something that you also hear. And so the big takeaway in a general scope of what this class is, the big takeaway is that we want to keep baby on breast and chest long enough for them to be satiated, and that they are fulfilling all the things that they need to move on with those milestones. And we'll talk more about that. But you really want to be careful about your language when we talk about hind milk and fore milk, right? Because that can be pretty sticky and unpleasant. Anybody have any other questions or concerns? They say you have to wait like 30 seconds. Whenever you say, hey, do you have any questions or concerns? You should wait 30 seconds for people to really get the courage to ask or formulate their question or whatever. But the silence, oh yeah.
I hear someone.
Is there any real difference between having the baby actually on the breast versus having them drink breast milk out of a bottle? Like any real health difference per se? Anything that's like significant?
That's actually a super interesting question. Okay, so this is super exciting. So, and I'm going to go more into this later, so I don't want to like spoil it for you as we start to go in, like kind of get you the draw to come back next week, right? Although I think some of you are forced to come back, so it's okay. But anyway, so there is a difference, and it's gonna be kind of a challenging thing to like accept. I actually had to grapple with it for quite some time, but there is a difference, and the reason being is the way the milk was extracted. So babies extract milk via compression. I have my boob right here. Babies extract milk via compression. They press on the breast tissue, and that's how they get milk out. And we'll go way more into this later. Pumping extracts milk via suction. And so because it extracts milk via suction, there are two things to remember. One is that's not how we're made. We aren't meant to respond to suction. That's not how we function. Second, though, research is beginning to show that milk content shifts between milk that was extracted via pump or suction, or milk that was extracted via compression. And one of the biggest takeaways, one of the biggest differences is that they're seeing is fat content. Fat content is less, and there's other components, but it is less than in milk that is pumped versus milk that is either hand expressed or expressed via compression, right? Either through baby or through hands. And so for me, I was like, that really sucks. I really hate that because we have fought so hard to get support in pumping at work, get support legislation, federal and state recognition for us to have the right to pump at work or at school or wherever, right? And now to find out that milk composition shifts because of pumping. So there's some ways to avoid it. One, and I'll go more into this, is hand expression. And that's the kind of the hill that I die on. So I talk a lot about it, and I'll talk more about it later, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about. But then also using hand expression while pumping, or breast compression. So if I'm pumping and I have the pump on here, I can use my hands to help move milk down the ducts and through the ductal system. That kind of helps, that kind of like supplements it. But to be honest, if I have a baby that maybe is not gaining weight fast enough, a failure to thrive, a preterm baby, I'm really going to push for hand expression because I feel like the milk content is going to be there for them to like step up those needs that they need, step up to those needs that they have. But again, I fight so hard. We fought so hard for pumping. It's kind of a mixed, sad moment. So
well, it's like you were saying before, like it's a helpful tool, but it's not, the system is the system, and the system is richly built the way it is. there are ways to work around it, and we, you know, try not to feel bad about it, because sometimes we do what we got to do.
Right.
But you know, there's still ways to augment it, like what you're saying with the breast squeeze. There's still ways to augment it.
And in this class, I do talk about hand expression, and I do talk about how to teach it to other people and how to do it to yourself. So, and I'll go more on that soapbox in a minute. Again, like I said, it's a hill that I'm going to die on, and that's okay. And I'm going to take y'all with me.
We're on our way.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Does anybody else have any other questions or concerns? Yeah, go for it.
So, is it true that the baby should make physical contact with the mom's breast if they're exclusively pumping, so that they can communicate with the breast and the milk, so that the milk can adjust and give the baby what it needs as the days and the weeks and the months and stuff go on?
I like this question. I like it because I think it kind of gives a moment for us to really make space for our exclusive pumping community members, right? Exclusive pumping is really putting in that sacrifice and doing all that work for that baby, and not really getting all the cute snuggles and nursing and all the things that you get to go that add on to nursing. But I will also say that, albeit exclusive pumping community members need support and need their individual support, that they still can provide the adequate milk supply, as well as adequate milk content for their infant. It is beneficial for babies to have that exchange, but but person and baby are still in the same environment. So one way or another, the boobs are going to catch on, and they're going to protect their baby the best they can. So albeit it's not a direct conversation, and I'll talk more about what that is and how that looks and what that means.
So
it's still
saliva touching the nipple.
That is a part of that conversation.
Okay,
but if that doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that milk isn't going to protect that baby from outside intruders, right? If person has a flu, right, and even though baby is not directly on tap, if person has a flu, they're going to create antibodies to protect that. If baby has the flu, they're going to create antibodies to protect that baby, because they live in the same space. They kiss, they lick each other, they do all the things that parents do. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns? I'm going to kind of switch gears here. So if there's any other questions about the previous content, this would be the most ideal time to do it.
So we're at 7:43. So
I'd like to maybe take a break, and then, because this is some nitty gritty stuff, and I would prefer not to take a break in between it, just so that we can have like a through line of content. I don't know how everybody feels about that.
You can do 5 minutes right now. It's fine.
Everybody okay? Yeah, 7:50.
Ready?
Okay, I'll tell Siri.
Okay.
Hey Siri. Alarm at 7:50 p.m.
I set your alarm for 1950.
Thank you, Siri. I have the British Siri. She's oh so posh.
Mine is Australian. I just changed it from South Africa. I love the South African one, to be honest.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones. Yeah. But now I just changed it to Australian.
I had the male Australian Siri all last year, and now I'm switching it up.
Yeah, well, it's good to switch it up. You know what I mean? I enjoy the switching it. The kids and I like to talk about different accents and dialects and stuff. Language is it's a super cool thing to think about. Yeah.
Oh, so hi, I'm Christina. I just wanted to, I'm a doula with Samsara. I just want to say that I actually have my Siri in the Australian accent, because I'm a little hard of hearing, and it's actually easier for me to understand.
I like it.
Yeah, it's harder for me to understand the American accent, for me to hear it.
So
so interesting.
American Siri mumbles.
It's like I like speak correctly. I don't understand.
Hilarious.
I don't know if it's because I'm hard of hearing or it's just easier for me to understand the Australian one. Yeah.
It's so funny.
This is the only other time I've heard someone say that they have Siri in the Australian accent as well. So that's pretty
Oh
cool.
yeah? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
dude. I love switching it up. I love making it, but like I said, the South African one is really nice because it reminds me of, oh, who is that? The guy that does the late night show, Trevor Noah. Oh yeah.
I love
Makes me
that.
feel like Trevor Noah is talking to me on the phone. I like that.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
so
okay.
funny.
Yeah.
Everybody has their likes, I guess.
Right?
It's so funny. I was talking to a client. We were talking about a specific concern with a neonatal concern, and I have Google in my living room, and Google overheard me and started giving all this data. I started talking and sharing about studies about this specific concern, and I was like, that is too freaky.
Yeah.
That was just
We have the Amazon version. I can't say it because it's in my bathroom so that we could listen to the news and music. The funny thing is like I remember talking about it with my partner and I was like, I don't want that in our house. It's just gonna listen to everything we have to say, blah blah blah. And he said, you have an iPhone, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you don't think that thing's been listening to you and monitoring you? This, and I was like, he's absolutely right. The minute I mentioned, oh, you know what, I've been looking for blank, right? You see it all in your ads, you see it all. It's been listening to me and tracking me this entire time. So then at this point, I'm like, yeah, let's have Alexa, because then I can, we can play music. I listen to the news, especially over the last couple of weeks. It's like Christmas morning, you know what I mean? Like impeachment and all this kind of stuff. It's like Christmas morning every day.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I still don't understand double impeachment.
Well, the thing was, and maybe I'm incorrect on this, is that when he got impeached the first time, he didn't get convicted. So he got